So when it was like he got shot, I was just more like, again? And even though we was going through our drama, I would never wish death on nobody.
Years after the passing of Tupac Shakur, a new video just popped up showing Biggie speaking about Tupac's death. His words, captured in interviews before his own murder, contradict decades of conspiracy theories that painted him as the mastermind behind his former friend's killing. Let's get into the details. The footage that flips the script. The footage in question captures Biggie Smalls speaking candidly about his reaction when he learned Tupac had been shot in Las Vegas. In the clip, Biggie describes what went through his mind when news broke about the September 7th, 1996 shooting on Flamingo Road.
It's a strong dude, yo. I know dude, you know what I'm saying?
Very
He's
strong.
real strong. So when it was like he got shot, I was just more like, again? You know what I'm saying? He always getting shot or shot at. He gonna pull through this one again, make a few records about it, and it's gonna be over, you know what I'm saying?
This wasn't the response of someone who had ordered a hit. This was the response of someone who had watched Tupac survive violence before. Tupac had been shot 5 times at Quad Studios in 1994 and walked out of the hospital the next day. Biggie assumed this would be the same outcome.
But when he died, I was just like, whoa. You know what I'm saying? Kind of took me by. Even though we was going through our drama, I would never wish death on nobody, you know what I'm saying? Because ain't no coming back from that.
The words hit different when you sit with them. I would never wish death on nobody. There ain't no coming back from that. These weren't rehearsed lines for damage control. This was a man processing loss in real time, grappling with the permanence of death, despite the public beef that had defined their relationship for 2 years. This footage matters because for decades, conspiracy theories have cast Biggie as the architect of Tupac's demise. A 2002 Los Angeles Times report claimed Biggie met with Crips in Las Vegas and offered $1 million plus his personal gun for the hit. The story spread through hip-hop culture like wildfire, becoming accepted as street gospel despite zero forensic evidence to support it. But the documented reactions from people closest to Biggie paint a completely different picture. Faith Evans, Biggie's then estranged wife, recalled him calling her crying, his voice low and small, saying, "That was my," and expressing fear that something ain't right. Producer Nasheem Myrick, who was in the studio with Biggie when the news broke, described stunned silence and disbelief. Snoop Dogg, who met with Biggie shortly after, noted visible hurt in his eyes despite the public feud between their respective coasts. The timing of this footage also matters. Biggie gave these interviews in early 1997, just months before his own murder in Los Angeles on March 9th. He was promoting his double album, Life After Death, and speaking openly about wanting to squash the beef, knowing Tupac could no longer do so himself. This is not the language of a killer. This is the language of a man carrying guilt about a situation that spiraled beyond anyone's control. A man who recognized that 2 individuals had accidentally sparked a war between entire regions of the country. Official investigations have found no direct ties linking Biggie to Tupac's murder. FBI files focused on gang dynamics and possible LAPD corruption, not on any Bad Boy Records conspiracy. When Dwayne Keefe D. Davis was arrested in 2023 for Tupac's murder, his confessions implicated himself and Crips affiliates, not Biggie or Bad Boy. The footage of Biggie speaking about Tupac's death changes everything because it humanizes a figure that conspiracy culture had transformed into a cartoon villain. For years, the narrative was simple: East Coast versus West Coast, Bad Boy versus Death Row, Biggie versus Tupac, and one of them had the other killed. But reality doesn't operate in such clean lines. The truth, as evidenced by documented reactions, investigative findings, and Biggie's own words on camera, points to a more tragic conclusion. 2 young men who were once friends became enemies through circumstance, media hype, and industry manipulation. One was killed by gang members seeking retaliation for a fight that happened hours earlier. The other was killed 6 months later, likely in retaliation for the first killing. Neither orchestrated the other's death. But to understand why this footage matters, we need to understand how these 2 artists went from collaborators to enemies in the first place. From brothers to bullets, the friendship that fractured. The relationship between Tupac Shakur and Christopher Biggie Smalls. Wallace began in the early 1990s, rooted in mutual admiration and creative kinship. Their bond formed during a period when both were ascending through the ranks of hip-hop royalty, their paths crossing at industry events and recording sessions across the country. Tupac and Biggie first connected around 1993 at a Los Angeles party, instantly bonding over shared experiences and musical ambitions. Tupac, already an established star with albums like Tupacalypse Now under his belt, took an immediate liking to the Brooklyn rapper. The connection was visceral and authentic. Tupac hosted Biggie at his home, cooked steaks for his crew, shared stories about the industry, and offered guidance on navigating the treacherous waters of the music business. The mentorship was genuine. Tupac saw untapped potential in Biggie and celebrated his early successes. According to accounts from the Slow Burn podcast, Tupac actively introduced Biggie to industry insiders and collaborated with him informally during studio sessions. When Biggie reportedly asked Tupac to manage him, Tupac declined but offered prophetic advice: stay with Puff Daddy because he would make Biggie a star. That prediction proved accurate, though the cost of stardom would ultimately prove fatal for both men. Their camaraderie extended to the stage. The two freestyled together at venues including Madison Square Garden during the 1993 Budweiser Superfest, their chemistry undeniable to anyone watching. Tupac influenced Biggie's approach to crafting music that could appeal to broader audiences while maintaining street credibility. For a brief moment in hip-hop history, these two generational talents existed in collaborative harmony. Then November 30th, 1994 arrived, and everything shattered. Tupac was ambushed and shot 5 times in the lobby of Quad Recording Studios in New York City. The attack occurred while he was heading upstairs to record, with Biggie and his associates present in the building. Tupac survived the assault, but his trust did not. From his hospital bed, he publicly accused Biggie and Puff Daddy of setting him up, citing their presence in the building and what he perceived as their suspicious reactions to the violence. Both Biggie and Combs vehemently denied any involvement or foreknowledge of the attack. No charges were ever filed against them, and no evidence has ever surfaced linking them to the Quad Studios incident. But the damage to the friendship was irreversible. Tupac's paranoia, intensified by the near-death experience and subsequent incarceration on unrelated sexual assault charges, transformed a perceived betrayal into an unshakable conviction.
And of course, even before that, 94, he gets assaulted at the Quad Studios in New York and believes that both Puffy and Diddy, at least for a little while initially, he thought that Puffy and Diddy had set him up and they were responsible for that, that robbery. I don't think so whatsoever. And I think he came to learn that it wasn't these guys.
The divide widened through external forces that neither man fully controlled. Tupac's October 1995 release from prison came courtesy of Death Row Records CEO Marion Suge Knight, who posted bail and signed the rapper to his label. This alignment positioned Tupac directly opposite Biggie in the emerging narrative of coastal warfare. Death Row represented the West Coast, Bad Boy Records represented the East Coast. The stage was set for confrontation. The 1995 Source Awards marked a turning point in the public escalation. Suge Knight took the stage and openly mocked Puff Daddy, asking artists who didn't want their label executive dancing in their videos to come to Death Row. The comment was a direct shot at Diddy's prominent presence in Bad Boy releases. The crowd's reaction, a mixture of boos and cheers depending on regional allegiance, illustrated how deeply the divide had already penetrated hip-hop culture. Diss tracks became the ammunition of choice. Biggie released Who Shot Ya in early 1995, a song he insisted was recorded before the Quad Studios incident and not aimed at Tupac. But Tupac interpreted the track as a direct taunt about his near-death experience, and the perception became reality in the court of public opinion. Tupac's response was the incendiary Hit 'Em Up, released in June 1996. The track was a scorched earth attack that targeted Biggie, Bad Boy, and everyone affiliated with them. Most controversially, Tupac claimed to have slept with Faith Evans, Biggie's wife, an allegation both Faith and Tupac would later complicate with conflicting statements. The Atlanta incident referenced in Greg Kading's interview occurred in 1995, when entourages from both camps clashed at a nightclub, resulting in a shooting death. Suge Knight held Diddy responsible for the loss of his friend, adding fuel to a fire that was already consuming both coasts. What makes the footage of Biggie discussing Tupac's death so powerful is the contrast it provides to this backdrop of hostility. Despite 2 years of public warfare, despite diss tracks and threats and actual bloodshed, Biggie's response to Tupac's death was grief, not satisfaction. His words on camera reveal a man who understood the beef had grown beyond either of their intentions, a man who recognized he now carried the burden of peace on both coasts because Tupac could no longer carry his share. The friendship that fractured left both men wounded. The industry, the media, and the streets amplified their personal conflict into a regional war, and when bullets finally flew in Las Vegas, they struck a man who had once been Biggie's mentor, collaborator, and friend. September 7th, 1996, the night that changed hip-hop forever. The night of September 7th, 1996 in Las Vegas began with spectacle and ended in tragedy. Mike Tyson was scheduled to fight Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand, and the event drew hip-hop royalty from across the country. Tupac Shakur attended alongside Suge Knight and a massive Death Row Records entourage, their presence commanding attention throughout the casino. The fight itself was anticlimactic. Tyson dispatched Seldon in the first round, but the real violence was yet to come. As the crowd dispersed through the MGM Grand lobby, a member of Tupac's entourage spotted Orlando Anderson, a member of the Southside Compton Crips. The sighting triggered an immediate confrontation rooted in events that had occurred weeks earlier. Anderson had allegedly stolen a Death Row medallion from Trayvon Trey Lane, a Death Row associate, during an altercation at a California mall. Rumors circulated that Suge Knight had placed a $10,000 bounty on anyone who could recover Death Row chains from rivals, though this was never verified. Lane alerted Tupac to Anderson's presence, and Tupac moved with aggressive purpose. Surveillance footage from the MGM Grand captured what happened next. Tupac initiating a physical assault on Anderson, with Suge Knight and other Death Row affiliates joining the attack. Security eventually intervened and separated the parties, but the damage was done. Anderson had been publicly humiliated on the Las Vegas Strip, and the Southside Crips were not going to let that stand.
So, back in '96, Tupac Shakur, as we know, was in Las Vegas, Nevada, watching a Mike Tyson fight. He's along with Suge Knight and this big entourage of people with Death Row Records. They're at the MGM. After the fight, Tupac gets into a fist fight with a gang member from Compton named Orlando Anderson. His street name was Baby Lane. After this fist fight takes place, security gets there, they break it up. Everybody goes their own way.
Following the altercation, the Death Row entourage left the MGM Grand and prepared to head to Club 6062, a new nightclub venture that Suge Knight was launching that evening. The club was an important enterprise for Knight. He was seeking gambling and liquor licenses, and having Tupac perform alongside a possible Mike Tyson appearance would cement the venue's status. Suge Knight drove a black BMW sedan with Tupac in the passenger seat. The rest of the entourage followed in vehicles behind them. Meanwhile, the Southside Crips were mobilizing. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, Orlando Anderson's uncle and a high-ranking Crips figure, assembled a crew that included Anderson, DeAndre Big Dre Smith, and Terrence Bubble Up Brown. According to confessions Davis would later make, the group rented a white Cadillac and armed themselves, initially planning to confront Tupac and Suge at Club 662. The encounter happened by chance on Las Vegas Boulevard. As the Death Row convoy moved through traffic, women on the street recognized Tupac and called out to him. The white Cadillac carrying the Crips spotted the commotion and made a U-turn to pursue. At approximately 11:15 p.m., at the intersection of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, the vehicles stopped side by side at a red light. The Cadillac pulled up on the passenger side of Knight's BMW, positioning itself directly alongside Tupac. Shots exploded from the rear window of the Cadillac, a barrage of .40 caliber rounds that tore through the BMW's door. Tupac was hit 4 times in the chest, arm, and thigh. Suge Knight sustained a graze to the head from a bullet fragment.
While stopped at a traffic light at the intersection of Flamingo and Koval, a white Cadillac pulled up on the passenger side of Knight's car and shot out of the window, hitting Tupac 4 times and grazing Knight in the head with a bullet fragment.
The shooters sped away toward Compton, where the Cadillac would later be cleaned and repainted to destroy evidence. Knight, despite his head wound, managed to drive away from the scene before eventually stopping. First responders found Tupac covered in blood, barely conscious. According to retired Las Vegas Police Sergeant Chris Carroll, who claimed to be first at the scene, when he opened the car door, Tupac fell out. Carroll asked, "Who shot you?" Tupac reportedly took a breath to respond, said, "You," and then lost consciousness. Those were his last words. Tupac was transported to University Medical Center and placed on life support in a medically induced coma. For 6 days, fans across the world held vigil, hoping the man who had survived being shot 5 times in 1994 would pull through again. On September 13th, 1996, Tupac Amaru Shakur was pronounced dead. He was 25 years old. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's investigation immediately focused on Orlando Anderson as a suspect, but the department faced a wall of silence. No one in Tupac's entourage cooperated with investigators, adhering to street codes that prohibited assisting law enforcement. Suge Knight, despite being wounded and present during the shooting, provided minimal information. Potential witnesses either refused to talk, or, in the case of Yaki Gaddafi, a Tupac associate who claimed he could identify the shooter, ended up dead before they could be interviewed. Anderson was briefly detained and questioned, but released due to lack of evidence. He consistently denied involvement in the murder until his own death in May 1998, when he was killed in an unrelated Tupac-related gang shooting in Compton. The case went cold for over 2 decades, but as the footage of Biggie's reaction shows, the man who conspiracy theorists blamed for orchestrating this hit was 2,700 miles away in New York, learning about the shooting from news reports just like everyone else, and responding with shock, grief, and disbelief. The investigation that cracked the code. For 27 years, the murder of Tupac Shakur remained one of the most notorious unsolved cases in American criminal history. Theories proliferated like weeds through hip-hop culture. Some pointed to Biggie and Bad Boy Records, others to Suge Knight, still others to government conspiracies and shadowy industry figures. But the investigative work of retired LAPD detective Greg Kading, combined with confessions from key participants, eventually revealed a truth far more straightforward than the elaborate theories that had dominated public discourse. Kading's involvement began in 2006, when the LAPD assembled a task force to re-examine both the Tupac and Biggie Smalls murder investigations. A $400 million civil lawsuit filed by Biggie's mother, Voletta Wallace, against the LAPD had forced the department to take a fresh look at evidence and theories that had been circulating for nearly a decade. The previous investigator, Russell Poole, had developed theories centered on LAPD corruption and potential involvement by off-duty officers moonlighting for death row records. While Poole's work uncovered circumstantial evidence connecting certain officers to Suge Knight, his theory never resulted in arrests and remained controversial within law enforcement circles.
You know, the challenge is, and I'm gonna do my darndest to figure it out. So,
and you need the right personality for this, because this is, like I was telling you earlier, you know. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sit with Greg. Great. We've done a lot of different interviews on the channel. We've never gone into the hip-hop side, and you know my interest with Tupac.
Kading's approach differed from his predecessor. Rather than pursuing theories about institutional corruption, he focused on developing informants within the gang structures that orbited both Death Row and Bad Boy Records. His breakthrough came when his team built an airtight federal drug case against Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, giving them leverage to extract information about the Las Vegas shooting. Facing life in prison for drug trafficking charges, Davis made a choice. Under what's known as a proffer agreement, a legal arrangement where a suspect can reveal self-incriminating information that cannot be used directly against them. Davis confessed to his involvement in Tupac Shakur's murder. According to Davis's confession, he served as the on-ground commander who orchestrated the retaliation following the MGM Grand fight. He described how his crew obtained a weapon, tracked Tupac's movements through Las Vegas, and ultimately pulled alongside the rapper's BMW at the Flamingo and Koval intersection. Davis admitted to being in the front passenger seat of the white Cadillac, handing the gun to one of the passengers in the back seat and witnessing the shooting firsthand. Critically, Davis's confession mentioned nothing about Biggie Smalls or Bad Boy Records orchestrating the hit. The motivation he described was simple and immediate: gang retaliation for the public beating of Orlando Anderson hours earlier. The Southside Crips had been humiliated on the Las Vegas Strip, and they responded with lethal force. Davis did, however, make claims about Puff Daddy. He alleged that Diddy had expressed willingness to pay for someone to handle the death row situation, citing a conversation at Greenblatt's Deli on Sunset Boulevard. But Kading was careful to contextualize these claims.
what I believe happened with Puffy was that, again, I don't think he wanted this conflict to get worse than it already was. And if he could figure out a way to quell that, he would. In fact, we have a statement saying that Puffy had reached out to the members of the Nation of Islam to approach Suge Knight and say, hey, let's have a peace treaty, let's squash this thing, but Suge wanted nothing to do with it. So he was trying to get out from under this imposing threat, knowing that Suge held him responsible for the murder of his friend, and whenever he would come to LA, he knew that Suge Knight was trying to hunt him down.
Kading concluded that even if Diddy expressed a desire for protection from Suge Knight's threats, the actual murder of Tupac was a spontaneous act of gang retaliation, not a premeditated hit ordered by East Coast record executives. The shooting happened because of the MGM Grand fight, not because of any contract or bounty. Importantly, Kading's investigation also addressed Biggie's murder 6 months later. Through another informant, a woman with close ties to Suge Knight, whom investigators gave the alias Teresa Swan, the team obtained a confession implicating Knight in ordering the retaliatory killing of Biggie Smalls. According to Swan, Knight instructed her to contact Wardell Poochie Faust, a known shooter affiliated with the mob Piru Bloods, and facilitate a $25,000 payment for the murder. The investigation's conclusions were straightforward. Tupac was killed by Southside Crips, seeking revenge for the MGM Grand beating. Biggie was killed by Bloods affiliates, seeking revenge for Tupac's death. Neither rapper orchestrated the other's murder. Both were victims of a cycle of violence that spiraled beyond anyone's control. Yet despite developing what Kading believed was sufficient evidence to close both cases, no prosecutions resulted from his investigation. The task force was disbanded in 2009, and Kading was reassigned. The gap between knowing and proving would persist for another 14 years, until Las Vegas prosecutors finally moved against Keefe D in 2023. The truth emerges: why Biggie wasn't involved. The 2023 arrest of Dwayne Keefe D. Davis marked the first time anyone had been formally charged with Tupac Shakur's murder in 27 years. Davis was indicted on first-degree murder charges as the alleged orchestrator of the fatal shooting, with prosecutors citing his own public confessions made in documentary interviews, his 2019 memoir Compton Street Legend, and media appearances as key evidence. But notably absent from the indictment was any mention of Biggie Smalls. Despite decades of conspiracy theories placing the Brooklyn rapper at the center of the murder plot, prosecutors made no allegations connecting him to the crime. The indictment focused exclusively on the Southside Crips' retaliation for the MGM Grand altercation. Davis, speaking from jail in his first interview since his arrest, now claims innocence despite his previous confessions. He asserts he was 300 miles away in Los Angeles when the shooting occurred and points to alternative suspects, including Reggie Wright Jr., a former security figure for Death Row Records.
I'm innocent. I ain't killed nobody, never did ever kill nobody. They don't have no evidence against me. Came and put me in Las Vegas.
61-year-old Dwayne Keefe D. Davis says the night of the murder, September 7, 1996, he was in Los Angeles, 300 miles from the Las Vegas intersection where Tupac Shakur was gunned down.
Davis now claims his previous admissions were made under duress and for money, stating he did not write his own memoir and was fed information by police. His trial is currently scheduled for August 2026 after multiple delays due to the review of new evidence. But regardless of how Davis's case resolves, the evidence consistently points away from Biggie's involvement. Multiple investigations, from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police to the LAPD task force to FBI reviews, have found no forensic evidence, no credible witness testimony, and no financial records connecting Biggie or Bad Boy Records to the murder plot. The infamous 2002 Los Angeles Times report claiming Biggie paid $1 million and supplied his personal gun for the hit has been widely criticized and effectively debunked. The story relied on anonymous gang sources and has never been corroborated by investigators with access to actual case evidence. Greg Kading has specifically addressed and rejected this theory, noting that his extensive investigation found no support for East Coast orchestration. The documentary evidence, the footage of Biggie speaking about Tupac's death with visible grief, his last interview expressing desire to end the coastal conflict, and eyewitness accounts of his emotional devastation, paints a picture completely inconsistent with someone who ordered a hit.
Well, I got the Life After Death double CD dropping March 25th. And I just want my spot back, you know? I chilled, came out with the Ready to Die. Everybody was feeling it. You know what I'm saying? And I rested for 2 years, worked on the Junior Mafia. Lil Kim, now it's time for me to come do my thing, you know?
In his final interview, Biggie spoke about his album title, Life After Death, as representing a new beginning, moving past the darkness and anger that had characterized his earlier work. He discussed wanting his music video to be hotter than Puff Daddy's, working on a clothing line called Brooklyn Mint, and considering potential movie roles. These were not the preoccupations of a man consumed by murderous rivalry. Most tellingly, Biggie expressed understanding that the beef had grown beyond either man's intentions and articulated responsibility for ending it. He recognized that Tupac could no longer advocate for peace, leaving Biggie to carry the burden alone. These were the words of someone grappling with the consequences of conflict, not someone celebrating a successful assassination. The ultimate tragedy is that Biggie himself became a victim of the same cycle of violence 6 months later. On March 9th, 1997, leaving a party at the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, Biggie was shot and killed in a drive-by that mirrored Tupac's murder in its execution. According to Kading's investigation, the hit was ordered by Suge Knight as retaliation for Tupac, meaning Biggie died not as a perpetrator, but as a target in an ongoing gang war that had claimed his former friend first. If you enjoyed watching this video, then go ahead and click on any of the cards on your screen for more.